Oh, there's Garrett.
Hey, how are you guys? Sorry for the problem with the link. I don't know what happened there.
Garrett, it seems the link though which you posted now does not lead to the usual registration page. Just letting you know.
Oh, thank you for pointing that out. I probably in my haste did not do the registration version, so I'm gonna have to fix it for next time. Thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah.
Wonder if there's a way to change it to make it include that.
I don't know if you can do it after you, I don't know,
Yeah,
after you already started the meeting.
it took me a while to figure out how to set that up the first time, and I don't know why it broke. But probably now is not the time to figure it out. I'll write a reminder to myself to figure it out another day. And thank you for pointing that out.
Sure.
I was just in another meeting, Garrett, with Dominic. I think it's the same Dominic.
It is indeed. Hi again.
Hello. We had a good discussion about human nature.
Yeah, we did.
Which is an interesting topic. And how perilous it is, how fickle we can be. And like the whole suite of human emotions, like when you go to the football and guys that are normally wear a tie and a suit and work in an office, go to the football and the caveman comes out very quickly. Yeah, it's an interesting discussion. Saying the caveman's never far away.
Well, now we go from caveman to aliens, so.
Yeah. They might have gone beyond cavemen.
Well, we always assume that aliens are ahead of us, but maybe that's also questionable.
Yeah, I'd argue some are ahead and some are behind. I don't think we're the total front runners nor the very last in line. So
it's just if they've gotten here, I guess you could assume they're smarter than us.
yeah, I think that at least the ones that have gotten here are, right? So since we really haven't gotten very far.
Yeah.
They haven't gotten here yet. And the notion that they have come and simply flown by or flown through the atmosphere and not landed at the at a parliament or at the residence of a head of state, or not tried to speak with humankind, it seems rather implausible, highly implausible.
So
however,
we'll have some video. We'll have some video later that I would love for you to explain if indeed there is no presence of aliens having been detected on Earth, because I don't know where these videos came from that were released by the government, but maybe you have a better explanation than aliens.
Why would there be? Why would the sightings of aliens all coincide with the rise of cinema and the rise of sci-fi film and the prevalence of the sci-fi genre? And in particular, why do they coincide? Almost all the sightings actually coincide with the rise of the rocket program, and both in the US and the Soviet Union, and the rise of the spy craft, right, which are the secret spy craft that both sides were using during the Cold War. This is when you get this array of different sightings and claims, and so it's a psychological effect. That doesn't mean that there are not other life forms in the universe. It simply means that the fact that they would cross, 10 light years or 10,000 or 10 million or 10 billion light years simply to come to Earth and fly by it strains credulity.
I mean, it's strange that you think that you know that that's what would have happened, or that that would be the limit of what has happened. But let's get into the social and let people introduce themselves, where they're from, and what interests them about the topic.
Hi, Garrett. Hi, hello, everyone. I'm Will. I'm on the sunny coast, east coast of Australia, and I'm sort of addicted to Zoom philosophy and Zoom discussion. Garrett, I was wondering if at some point maybe we could just have a poll, like a show of hands, maybe towards the end of the meeting, where you can only vote yes or no. If you had to bet the farm on it, would you say aliens have visited us or not? I'd like, that'd be interesting, I think, to just get a poll. But you can't say I don't know. You've got to, if you had to bet your life on it, would you say yes or no? I wondered if that'd make an interesting.
I think it's an interesting idea to do at the beginning of the event and then at the end. So I'm going to see if I can quickly figure out polls. I haven't used them before, so.
Or just a show of hands. Yeah.
You need to
Hi,
have
everybody.
you need to have an
I'm
answer.
sorry.
It's impossible to say. Because that's what a scientist would say. It's
No,
impossible.
a scientist wouldn't say it's impossible to say. The scientist would say if you have overwhelming evidence, you would
There's
rule
no
them
evidence of any kind. None.
not evidence of any kind. That's not how science works. Overwhelming evidence.
There's no evidence of any kind.
So let's,
Excuse me.
guys, let's not get into the debate right now.
You're
You know,
saying that a scientist would say.
Will, I get it, Will.
there's no
I get it.
evidence.
He's entitled to his opinion. We can talk about what scientists will say in the discussion portion. You know, so let's let Sunny has her hand up. Has their hand up. So let's let Sunny go.
An
Welcome.
interesting start.
Hello, everybody. I'm very excited to see you all. This is a timely topic, whether you know it or not. I follow, I'm very, very excited about anything to do with space. Aliens or no aliens, I don't really care. I just really love the subject of astronomy. But at the moment, I'm kind of interested. I came upon ever since the Tic Tac sighting in 2017, that was admitted by the federal government that they didn't know what it was and they could not explain it. I've been like, wow, that is a real indicator that we have in fact been visited by someone. Believe it or not, it doesn't really much matter. But anyway, interesting. Has anyone seen the article on the debrief recently? It just came out yesterday. And I think it's extremely interesting that the lead title is Intelligence Officials Say U.S. Has Retrieved Craft of Non-Human Origin. And the article goes on to name names and give titles of people within the Defense Department that claim that there were craft collected over many, many, many years, and that they are being, how do they say it, reversed engineered. Now, if there's any truth to this, this is like the biggest thing that's ever been told in American in history, all of history. If you know, it could be a crock, but I tend to, I'm very interested. I'm sorry, am I talking too much?
No, it's okay, Sunny, but do keep it brief because this is just the social. We'll get into the conversation afterwards. But if you could post a link to that,
so
I would
sorry.
like to see. I would love to have you share the link for the you know, what news source it was, to know whether it's a credible news source or you know, what news source it was.
Surely. So sorry, I tend to yak. Bye-bye.
That's okay. That's a good trait. Thank you, Sunny. Joseph, do you want to go next?
Sure. My name is Joe Bullock. I'm from just outside of Philadelphia, located in New Jersey. And my interest in the topic is that I don't know much about it. And in the spirit of remaining open to new ideas, I'm always looking to learn something new, and that is you know, including things that are not of this world potentially. So I look forward to hearing what people have to say on the topic. And one way or the other, I'll definitely hear something that I hadn't heard before. So I'm looking forward to that. Anyway.
Great, thanks. Janet, you want to go next?
Yeah, hi there. According to like what Will was saying about a poll, you can also kind of do it in the chat maybe. But I was interested in this because there's a UFO museum in Pine Bush, New York, and I went to it. So before going to it, Decoded used to be a TV series, and he did something on it, and he was saying that it might be the government or it might really be UFO, and he kind of left it. But after going to the museum, it sounds more legit. So I'm looking forward to more information.
Great,
Thank you.
thank you. Anyone else want to say hi for the social, maybe where you're from and what interests you in the topic?
Just one thing that you could consider, if there's a pause there, I'll say something, that perhaps they haven't traveled billions of light years or millions of light years. They were here before us. They've evolved before us, because there is intelligent life in the sea. Dolphins and whales are extremely intelligent. And why couldn't they have evolved in the sea? Perhaps they dwell under ice caps. 60% of the ocean is more than 1 mile deep. So, 75% of the Earth's surface is covered by water, and 60% of that is more than 1 mile deep. So 42% of the whole Earth's surface is covered by water that's more than 1 mile deep. They've got no idea really what's down there or under the ice caps. There's another theory. And maybe they look at us like we look at chimpanzees, and we say, why don't we get all the chimpanzees in the Congo and take them to Oxford University or Harvard or Princeton or Cambridge? What's the point? They're just so far behind us. We can't teach them anything. And maybe that's how they look at us. Like, there's not much we can do, guys. There's still a work in progress.
So I'm going to launch a poll so that I can get a before and after poll, and I don't know if it'll keep the history, but tell me if this worked. I just tried to launch a poll.
Yep.
So we're going to ask whether or not you believe aliens exist and whether or not you think they visited Earth. Two separate questions.
That's a push poll. You need to include the question. It is not the answer. We cannot answer the question.
Don't know
That's
means that you feel you can't answer the question, but other people are
Please.
entitled to say that they think they can answer it.
Please don't have can't. Please just word it like if you had to answer one, yes or no. You've only got that choice. No, so we just get a clear delineation. No, I don't know. Just if you had to bet the farm on it, yes or no. Call it. Call it.
I like to give people options, Will. I know you want to force them into a yes or no, but I don't. I want to give.
It's interesting. It's well, I don't see. It's just interesting. Like, if you had to bet the farm, it's not like we're saying we're not
I get
betting.
it. No, there's no stakes, Will. But if someone wants to say they don't know, like, I'm willing to let them say that. So, and some people have chosen to say that, which is totally fine. And maybe at the end of the session, well, maybe they'll change their mind and they'll feel like they have a strong opinion one way or the other. Wouldn't that be interesting to see? So I'm going to close the poll in just 1 second. And I'm going to try to ask the same poll question at the end. I don't know if it's going to let me reuse the poll, but if you did want to get your answer in, go ahead and get it in first. It seems like a pretty high percentage agree that, you know, not only have aliens, well, I guess the poll, I'm going to just close it and then I hope you guys will see the results. I'm going to share the results now. A pretty large percentage of people feel like aliens do exist and that aliens have visited Earth. That is the vast majority, actually. It's actually the smallest percentage is of people who think that aliens don't exist at all. which is interesting. Like that surprises me. Like when I was a child, that would not have that would not be the answers to this poll. But let's have Dominic go next in the social, and then we're about 6 minutes in, so we'll let the people with their hands up go with the social. Dominic, Dave, and then Victor, and then we'll start the presentation, which is not very long. It'll be a lot of conversation.
Cool. I keep it brief. Thanks for hosting. Name is Dominic. I'm based in Denmark. I was always fascinated of the topic, but I kind of dip in and out of it because sometimes you hear something in the news. I also follow the debrief. Nice reference there. And then, you know, you're like, oh my God, something is happening. And then actually nothing is happening. But then something else comes up and then you're like back in the game. So I love the poll. I would just say about the poll, I included something like some kind of microorganisms that will be transported on an asteroid would also come through in a kind of a frozen state. So this is the way I looked at the question. So they don't always have to come in kind of large machines and, you know, hyperspace or whatever. So maybe, yeah, just putting it out there. That was my approach. And that's why I said yes. Cool. Looking forward to our conversation. Thank you.
Thanks, Dominic. I think that counts. Even microbiological alien life counts. But Dave, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm, given the number of Goldilocks planets out there, Goldilocks meaning that it's within the zone of not being too hot or too cold. There's 100 billion galaxies, 100 billion stars per galaxy. Our star is nothing special. So probably, the chances are for sure, I would argue there's almost no chance there isn't aliens out there. I don't think they visited us though, because there's just too much space between us and other planets. It's a huge universe. It's a little bit too big. If you ask me, it should be about the size of the solar system. So then we could all get together with the aliens. Anyway, that's my answer. Thanks.
Thank you. Victor, go ahead.
Okay. I'm interested in it because I'm interested in everything. I'm particularly interested in ecology and earth science and the sixth mass extinction. And at the same time, cosmology and astrophysics. So, hello?
Sorry, I'm going to Robin. I don't think they realized that they were unmuted.
Okay. And so, if I could just say one thing that's kind of that's analytical to start, the way in which exobiologists look at it in terms of the two ends of the spectrum is, on the one hand, the Fermi paradox. Where is everybody? Where are the signals? Where are the Dyson spheres around stars that we can image? And where are the signals verifying that there are other life forms at this moment that are able to communicate with us in the galaxy or from some other galaxy? There's no evidence of any of that. And that's the Fermi paradox. On the other side of it is the Drake equation, right? Which has to do with the likelihood, okay? And this is just pure probabilistics. This is not science that can be confirmed. It's the pure probabilistics of whether there are life forms on other planets. You have to be in the Goldilocks zone of your galaxy. You have to be far enough away from the supermassive black hole. You have to be perhaps like our star outside of the spiral arm. So you're not going to be facing supernovae and black holes and gamma ray bursts. You've got to be in the Goldilocks zone of your star. You have to have abundant water, abundant carbon. In terms of our model, you need a moon, you need a magnetic field, or you're never going to get complex life forms. So that if in the Drake equation, the highest likelihood is of simple life forms, and the lowest likelihood is of intelligent life forms, especially when you consider that the Earth is 4.6 billion years old, and it took us until 200,000 to 300,000 years ago to have Homo sapiens. So those would be sort of some of the parameters of the scientific debate. No one who is serious in exobiology is saying that the Earth has been visited by aliens. No one.
That's disputable. That's
Well,
a very It's a sweeping statement that you're categorically saying that
He's
no-
probably right, though.
Look it up in ChatGPT, Will, and if you have a counter argument from ChatGPT, go ahead and share it in the discussion portion. Is that fair?
Yeah, if I can be bothered doing it.
Listen to this guy.
So, let's get started on the not the Fermi paradox, the presentation portion. Let me pull up the presentation. Janet, by the way, you still have your hand up, and Victor, so do you, if you don't mind putting those down. And then I'm gonna before I share my screen, I want to do the intro. So let's kind of kick things off. So first of all, welcome everybody to tonight's Tuesday night live meetup, and through Zoom. I'm Garrett Lang. I'm a software developer turned software inventor. Most of my career I've been a software inventor and now an entrepreneur, and my hobby is writing and discussing practical philosophy. Although tonight I will argue is a little less practical than most of what we talk about in the FTI. And I'm also the executive director of the FTI, which is an organization. It's a not-for-profit, actually, looking to support and empower members. Our focus is on helping people be the best version of themselves, to seek truth and to be fair. Tonight's session is more about seeking truth. And we want to do that through transformational personal and professional development. We have these free events on Tuesday evenings covering a wide range of topics not typically covered in academia or industry. No one's really talking about aliens in academia or industry, as I think someone mentioned. It's not commonly discussed, although I don't know if no one is discussing it. That's a separate question, which I'll try to ChatGPT during the conversation portion. And then we also have weekly members only events for people who want to apply practical philosophy into their daily lives. And we have only one rule, and Ellis will post information about membership for those interested in that. It's a great way to make new friends and help each other achieve goals. And then we have only one rule in the FTI, and that is to remain polite. That keeps us in the logical portion of the brain so that we're not debating emotionally, we're talking about things rationally. And I really want to encourage everyone to keep in that rational part of the brain, keep calm, cool, and collected. We'll have a much better conversation that way. People are generally pretty good about it in these meetups. So I appreciate everyone sticking to that. Part of that is what we call at the FTI listening to understand, which means trying to understand where other people are coming from, especially when we vehemently disagree with them. The more we disagree with someone, the more important it is to understand why they have the opinion that they do. And so really trying to empathize with other people and see where they're coming from. So tonight's session, as you all seem to know, is about aliens. Pretty large universe. I'm going to talk about how large. So to the point that was made about Fermi's paradox, it seems a little bit odd to think that we would be the only life. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about that. And then I guess, with that, I'm just going to jump into the presentation portion. Let me share my screen. I don't think I am yet. And I hope I have these videos. I do. Good. So I'm going to share my screen next. All right. So let me get my window up. There we go. All right. So
I don't know if you can see this, but your poll is blocking your presentation.
oh, thank you for letting me know that. Is that better?
Yes.
Great. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I am
Excuse
new
me.
to polls, so
Garrett,
yeah.
is this being recorded?
Yes, we record all our events. So yes, it is being recorded. And hi, Carolyn. How are you? Is it okay that it's being recorded? We don't have to post this one if you want, or we can edit it before posting it.
Oh,
So,
no, I would love to share it with somebody.
okay, yeah, we do record it. Sorry, that was
Excellent.
Janet. Carolyn, was Carrie able to make it?
Carrie's working. He
Okay,
said he would try to join. He's off at 5
no worries.
Pacific Daylight, so he said he would try to catch a wave.
So, oh, I forgot to mention that, well, we'll get to it in the discussion portion, but we'll have a way to sort of alert, like, just let me know if he comes and I'll give him a chance to talk. And so, you know, for now, the presentation is probably going to be pretty short. So, you know, we'll have a lot of discussion tonight. So that said, let's get into the presentation. So, I'm not going down the too much of the typical path. I'm not using the Drake equations tonight. I'll talk a little bit about the Fermi paradox, but more trying to take a new, more original approach. You know, rather than the sort of typical ways of approaching this problem. So first, I'm going to talk about the size of the known universe, which does relate a little bit to Drake's equation, but I'm just going to talk about the sheer vastness of the known universe. This is the number of planets, 2 with, I believe it's 21 zeros behind it, is the number of planets estimated in the known universe. That's the low number estimated. There are between 100 billion and 400 billion stars in our galaxy, the Milky Way alone. And estimates say there's at least 1 planet per star on average, and that there are about 2 trillion galaxies in the observable universe. So that 2 trillion times 100 billion is this number. And so it's a pretty big number. So to think that out of this large number of planets, kind of unfathomable, quite frankly, unless you're really good at imagining infinity, which I've done a lot of practice at, you know, it's a very large number. And to think that we're the only life in that very large number of planets seems pretty improbable, which is what Fermi was saying. And if I'm right about my hypothesis on the origins of the universe, this is not all there is in the universe. This is just one corner, our corner of the universe. The universe is truly infinite, with an infinite number of planets and an infinite number of opportunities for life, and therefore an infinite number of lives, you know, types of life in this very vast, you know, literally infinite universe. Now, we had another session for that tonight, so we won't go down the infinite universe argument. I made that argument at another event. If people want that recording, just let me know afterward and I'll get it for you. But that said, it looks like I didn't turn off the whiteboard, which I thought I did. Annotate on shared content was still on. So
Sorry.
That's all right. So let me clear all drawings. There we go. So it wasn't your fault, it was my fault. I should have blocked it from happening. I thought I locked everything down, but I didn't quite get there. So are we the most advanced life is another question that we might ask that was talked about in the social. Probabilistically, it seems pretty unlikely in that vast universe that we are literally the most advanced life. And I'll talk about a few reasons why I think it's very unlikely that we're the most advanced life in the universe. And I also think, you know, we know of lots of less complex life on Earth itself. So very easy to imagine that there's lots of less complex life out there in the universe as well. So I think we're somewhere in the middle. There is actually there are a couple of videos that I want to show. This is, you know, these are some videos released by the US government of unidentified flying objects, which have been renamed because it's politically incorrect to say unidentified flying objects now. So there's a new name. Someone can remind me what it is if they remember. Let me
UPI.
Is that what it is?
UPA.
Oh wait, I'm on here we go. So
How to kill all mosquitoes in the
sorry,
area
I'm
in
supposed
90
to have
seconds.
a premium version.
This
of
simple but
YouTube
brilliant
for my
trick you can do.
kids, but for some reason it doesn't work. So this is the first video. It's only 3 minutes long, but it's, you see, like, this is like a normal object, and then you have this thing going super fast. It's probably not easy to say exactly how fast, but you can see that it's kind of like zigzagging back and forth in this way that seems a little uncharacteristic with any of the aircraft that, you know, that I'm aware of, in sort of the speed at which it's going back and forth and sort of jagging, you know, zigzagging back and forth. So that seems a little unusual. I think the second video is a little bit better, but these were the two that I found quickly. This starts to get a little weird, right? Now we're getting flying saucer-ish. And these are videos that the government itself released saying, we don't know what the hell these things are. You know, we can't explain what we're seeing on this radar. We see it. And one of the people in the social said, well, all of these sightings have started occurring since we had modern technology and jet engines. I'll address that a little bit later. But the other thing to keep in mind is our ability to detect these things has only really been since that time. So, you know, radar is a pretty modern invention. It's, you know, the ancient Romans didn't have radar, although we'll talk about some ancient Roman sightings of UFOs later in the presentation. So this is pretty, you know, unusual, like, you know, that the government would release stuff like this on a radar where they don't know what it is, right? They can't explain it. It's going back and forth. Now, I have to say, like, it seems like a weird pattern for an alien. And some people were saying these aliens came and just flew by and didn't do anything. But do we really know that they're not doing anything when they move in this sort of senseless seeming pattern? Like, theoretically, this is something that's intelligent enough to come to our planet from interstellar travel. How much do we really know about them? You know, like, I don't think we should try to assume that we understand exactly how aliens work. So I didn't watch the whole, I didn't watch this part, so. Oh, there's this. This is higher fidelity. So there's no sound to this video. And it is on Fox News, which doesn't always, you know, doesn't always report factual information.
How to kill all mosquitoes
is,
in the area in 90 seconds.
This
simple but brilliant trick you can do tonight to eliminate all.
This is government video, so it's not, you know, something that was made up by Fox News. So, you know, it seems like a pretty legit. This is another one from The Guardian.
Oh, this is a ticked SS Nimitz.
It's not how that's known, is it? It's not well, if there's a it's rotating.
So those are some videos that the government has released that they don't know what they are. And, you know, as the US, for those that don't know, our military spends more money on the US military than all of the other countries combined. So we have some pretty advanced tech. And for something to be beyond the knowledge of what our tech is capable of, according to official government sources, is kind of a big statement. Doesn't mean that China couldn't have like circumvented us with, you know, a tenth or less our military spend, and suddenly can go 10 times as fast as us in more maneuverability. Like maybe they pulled it off, like theoretically. But I would argue that's probably not the most likely explanation for what we just saw. I think given the vastness of the universe, that Fermi's paradox is not a paradox at all. I think that alien life very well has visited Earth. And there are lots of accounts of that. And hopefully we'll have someone who has a personal account of it later in tonight's event. So should we be afraid of aliens? So if we look at how much mankind has advanced in the last 500 years alone, and then we think about that Earth itself is 4.5 billion years old, and we've advanced this much in the last 500 years, and we know of planets that are at least 13 billion years old, it seems very likely that a more advanced life does exist and is so much more advanced than us that if it wanted to destroy Earth and its inhabitants, or just take us over or kill us all, it would have already done it, right? Like if these flying saucers, you know, wanted to destroy Earth or destroy humanity, or, you know, go to our leaders and have a, you know, a run out conversation, they would be able to do that. That doesn't mean that's what they want to do or that that's what their goal is. Again, I think trying to think that we understand something that would be so much more advanced than us is a little bit, I don't want to use a word that sounds dismissive, but I think that we should have the humility to understand that there's probably a lot we don't understand about something that's that advanced as, you know, compared to us. And the way that I like to compare it is like, you know, we're going to have a conversation about AI, you know, in next week, and let me save that for then. But let's just say that, you know, let's say alien life was only 1,000 times smarter than us. That would be like comparing an ant to us. And so how much does an ant really understand about humanity and the way that we work, and how can it make sense of the way that we work? We would be trying to make similar sense of something that's probably far, far more advanced than we are compared to an ant. So look, I'm all for intractable problems and trying to understand them, and trying to like empathize with what an alien's perspective might be and why they might be here, or why they may be wanting to be involved in Earth. But my personal opinion is that if they're that advanced, like science-wise, they probably are that advanced wisdom-wise. And if so, that their intentions are probably to help us rather than to hurt us. And they probably also have some level of, my guess is, some level of respect for not wanting to just kind of beat us over the head. Because if they wanted to do that, they would have already done that, right? Because something that advanced could easily do that. And so probably there's a different approach. I think probably an altruistic one, because if they wanted to cause harm, it would already be obvious that the harm would be being caused, and it would be very obvious to us. You know, it would be a lot like the movies. What was that movie where the aliens came and destroyed Earth? I guess there's a million movies like that, but you get it. All the movies where aliens destroyed Earth. So I would say we shouldn't be afraid of aliens. You know, and as for the Fermi paradox, I don't think it is a paradox at all. Like I said, I think there's lots of evidence, and I'm going to go into historical sightings, that aliens have visited us. And so it's not true that we don't have evidence of aliens. We just don't have evidence the way that Fermi expected it. Now, just because the evidence didn't show up the way Fermi expected it, doesn't mean the evidence doesn't exist. It just means he was looking for something other than the way that aliens present themselves, which is fine. Like, we all make mistakes. Fermi was a pretty smart guy, but he could have made a mistake too. And so let's talk about historical sightings, because someone said that the UFO sightings have all been since 1947. Well, actually, ancient Egypt talked about fiery discs floating over the sky in 1480 BC. That's pretty old. There were no radars or jet engines or any of that stuff back then. Roman times, the Book of Prodigies includes an account of strange phenomena that could be considered UFOs. In the Middle Ages in 1561, there was celestial phenomena over Nuremberg, and they reported seeing an aerial battle followed by a large black triangular object and then a crash outside of the city. Now, maybe these were people who had some, what do you call it? The story of the Salem witch trials was moldy bread, right? And they got some psychedelic bread and they were just imagining this stuff. But maybe actually these were real sightings, and maybe there were more of them. They just weren't regularly documented because everyone thought those people were crazy. Because what are you going to think if you're in the 1500s and someone says they see flying things in the air that look like bright objects, right? You're going to think that person's crazy. In fact, we've thought people were crazy for thinking about UFOs. Even when I was, young in the 80s, anyone that talked about UFOs being real, was not treated well. And so all I would say is, if nothing else that you get out of this discussion is, and let me just answer the question, like I said, about practical philosophy. To me, this is not really a practical subject. There's no major practical impact other than if someone shares an experience with you that they had an interaction with extraterrestrials or they saw a UFO, don't dismiss them, right? Listen to them with an open mind. That's part of the second intention of the FTI, is to share your experiences authentically and honestly, and to listen to other people with an open mind that they may help you get closer to truth. And maybe, just maybe, they actually had an authentic experience, and you can look for any reason that that person might be being dishonest. If they ask you to invest in alien technology and to give you all their life savings, probably not a good idea to give them all your money, right? Have some healthy skepticism there. But if all they're doing is sharing their experience and nothing more, well, let's not belittle or bully them for sharing an experience that, is likely to inspire a lot of negativity from people. Although I will say tonight's audience is very friendly, because most of us think that not only do aliens exist, but that they have visited Earth. And we thought that at the beginning of the discussion, and I'm going to try to do another poll at the end of the discussion portion. And with that said, I would love to hear if this was helpful. And then I also want to introduce the discussion portion of the time tonight. And so basically just raise your hand. We'll answer questions one at a time, or take comments one at a time. Please limit to one question or one comment per time you raise your hand. You can drop it and raise it again immediately. But we just like to stick to one topic at a time, because otherwise it's too much to respond to. And I like to at least respond to people. And if you want to respond to something that someone just said, use your little party hat, which is under reactions, which is exactly where the raised hand is. And so I'm going to give a demo of that, and Ellis might give a demo of it. Under reactions, this is the party hat, the party symbol. And so if you want to respond to what someone just said, put that little party symbol up. Ellis is doing it too. And that way we know. Thanks, Dave, for demonstrating that too, and Will. So that will be your indicator that you want to reply to what someone just said, like out of turn, but very quick, please, because it's coming out of turn and we don't want to take forever on one person's comment. But we do want to let people respond and make this very interactive. So with that said, Will had the first hand up, so I'm going to go ahead and let him comment or ask a question.
Thanks, Garrett. Excellent presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Much appreciated. Great topic. I was just thinking with this thing, with human arrogance, that we tend to think we know it all, and then subsequent generations of scientific inquiry prove just how wrong we got it. And we can apply that to how we historically have seen common held scientific beliefs from hundreds of years ago. We think, like, can you believe they actually thought that? Or they didn't know about television. They didn't know that TV waves and radio waves were abounding. This was possible. Still, most people wouldn't know how television works. They just don't know. But we just take it for granted. If you tried to explain the physics behind a television to somebody from 400 years ago, you'd probably be put into an asylum, saying that somebody could appear on a glass screen in the corner of your lounge room, and they could, in fact, why is Dave waving his hand like that? I'm just wondering. Is it telling me to hurry up, or is he speaking to someone else, perhaps?
No, I just sort of, okay, your point being.
Aha. So that's interesting, Dave, because I've got like maybe 45 seconds into what I was saying, and I think I've got 2 minutes. And now you're asking for my point. So one would wonder why I've upset you so. And perhaps you're becoming agitated because you're chomping at the bit to say what you want to say. Well, I'd suggest
I don't have a, I don't have a hand.
I irritate you, do I? The way I'm
let's
speaking.
just let Will finish his thought. So go ahead and finish your thought, Will. We want to hear
It's
it.
interesting. Yeah, I find some people irritating as well. It's interesting that you find me irritating.
Let's not be irritated. Let's try to empathize.
Let's have a fight.
Guys,
I'd rather just have a fight.
Guys, let's empathize with each other rather than be irritated by each other. You're both smart.
Sorry, this is the free thinkers. I love you, Dave. And so anyway, if we were to try and explain a television to somebody from hundreds of years ago, we'd probably end up in a loony bin. So the point is that in hundreds of years from now, they'll probably be looking at us going, can you believe these intelligent, arrogant apes, narcissistic, destructive apes? That's what they thought back then. I would say that given that our known universe is 13.5 billion years old, there could be civilizations which are billions of years. And as you and I have discussed previously, Garrett, if the Big Bang that caused our known universe, which is 70 billion light years wide, was not local, and in fact, there may have been infinite Big Bangs prior to this moment in time, there could be infinite civilizations. There could be known universes of which we will never see because they're just too far away, and it could go on infinitely. There could be technologies advanced that they don't even need to come here. They could be tuning into our brainwaves as we speak, just for a bit of entertainment, to see why does Will annoy Dave so much, you know? And you know, so we're just so arrogant. That's what annoys me. Meanwhile, 200 species die every day on Earth. That as man crushes them underfoot, and we think we know everything. Thank you.
Thanks, Will. It's a good reminder that we need to remain humble as humanity, and it, like, you know, just a couple hundred years ago, slavery was still normal, right? And now we consider it barbaric, although it's still commonly practiced, unfortunately. So I think your point that, you know, society is advancing and learning, and that a couple hundred years from now, things that are considered crazy now will be normalized, and new discoveries is a great point, and we should always keep our minds open, and that's part of what the second intention of being open-minded is about. So that said, Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciated the presentation. You know, this is something where, again, I'm far from an expert, but as far as, there's just a couple things. I do remember Stephen Hawking actually making comments along the lines that it would be likely that there would be alien life, and that it would be unlikely that it would be probabilistic that they would actually be unfriendly. And that he said it was one of the concerns for humanity in general. And many of the same statements that were made, in the sense that this many galaxies and this many stars, that we're the only one with any kind of intelligent life form is unlikely. And so, but that being said, there is a lack of evidence, hard evidence at this point. The pictures from the Pentagon were interesting. I always distrust anything that comes out of there. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but as I said, you know, you mentioned, Garrett, that their budget is 10 times whatever, 10 or more than the next 10 countries combined. So it's not that I am, you know, skeptical of their technology or anything along those lines, but I am skeptical that they want more money, and that this could be a way of getting it. So I look at the motivations. I do think China could have built something as well. I think that's a reasonable explanation as well. But that being said, it can't be ignored either. So I'm just skeptical of it. And it will be interesting to see where this goes. I do think that we should have be exploring as much as possible to determine, what other life forms there are, which means there should be heavy investment in space exploration. And I think that actually has a lot of value. And so that is something I value for a lot of different reasons. I won't go into that though. But anyway, it was a great presentation. I really think that there's, a lot of questions, but I think this is really a case where, of being open-minded. So that's the most refreshing thing out of this that I can take.
Thank you. And that was my goal, is to take a new tact at it. The other thing I forgot to mention in the presentation is that I think if alien life was destructive, it would most likely have destroyed itself, just like we've almost destroyed ourselves with nuclear war several times at some very, very close calls. There have been 2 times that we were like one person away from nuclear holocausts globally, which if you don't know, I can recount those stories later on if people are interested. They were pretty scary, and there were some heroes involved. So and so that's why I think that alien life is more likely peaceful than destructive, because if it was destructive, it probably would have killed itself as a civilization before it got to us. But that said, I could be wrong, right? Like, I'm just guessing. I'm just making an educated guess. So Dave, go ahead.
At some point.
Yeah, I think the trouble, I personally believe that there are a lot of sentient beings out there, probably having discussions similar to ours tonight. But the trouble is the spatial and temporal separation, because the universe is pretty big, as you said, Jarrett. It's too big to make contact easily. In fact, within 16 light years of us, there's only like 50 suns. So that's only 50 potential life-bearing planets. So that's not a lot. And, given that it's not for sure that sentient beings evolve on every life-bearing planet, it's pretty low probability that there's even intelligent life forms within 16 light years of us, which light years are huge. So I think I think there could be plenty of life out there, and we would have no contact with it ever. And depending on how long civilizations last, which is another time factor, civilizations could be like small blips on a long line of time. And if there are aliens and they do try to contact us, I would suggest it would be nanobots, because you could send out like billions or trillions of nanobots. I don't think there'll be guys in flying saucers coming into land and saying, hey, we're from the planet Zetar or something. I think the most likely scenario would be microbots, nanobots, and so far we haven't found any, but you never know. That's all I have to say.
So Dave, just a quick ChatGPT comparison for you. About 100 years ago, the fastest things on Earth are, for traveling were horses, which went about 43 miles an hour. In 2021, the Parker space probe went 330,000 miles an hour. That was in 100 years. We went from 43 miles an hour to 330,000 miles an hour. Now let's fast forward 1 billion years.
Yeah, I know what you're saying, but it's not exactly a linear situation. I could say, what was it, 50 years ago, I flew to Australia, and the speed of the jetliner was the same as it is today. So it's not, I think it's a diminishing return situation. I don't think we just.
I think our current science would agree with you, but I don't know that our current science understands the whole thing. But Joe, go ahead. You wanted to comment?
I mean, I don't necessarily think that there's a lot that's been written about that, and that's because it's regulatory, reasons, as not necessarily lack of scientific progress as to why that occurred.
Oh, you mean the planes flying at the same
Yes,
speed?
absolutely.
Yeah, well, anyway, okay.
Yeah, I mean, there was the Concorde, which was pretty darn fast, right? It just was too expensive,
Yeah, it took so much fuel to get that much faster, it was hugely expensive, so that's the
Right.
issue. But
Once we figure out the flying saucers and we're reverse engineering that alien technology, like maybe we'll figure it all out and we'll have a new Concorde that's even faster and more fuel efficient. But we'll see. I actually don't know if Sunny actually posted. Oh, Sunny's next. Let's hear from Sunny. Did you post your source for that, Sunny? Because I would love to read it.
I did.
All
I
right.
did. I posted that, and I think I posted a link to one of the better podcasts I listen to. Anyway, I was thinking about a number of things during this, listening to everyone else. First of all, it's not true that the scientific community looks upon UAP as poppycock out of hand. There's a number of truly brilliant people who are pursuing studying this subject. For example, Avi Loeb, the head of astrophysics at Harvard, Gary Nolan, an immunologist inventor who is very involved in a lot of this study through Stanford University, and my personal favorite, whose last name I cannot pronounce, Matthew Sidakis. He is with, I can't remember who he's with, but he studies dark matter, which is fascinating because nobody can put their finger on dark matter. And he is looking at the transition of space and time using dark matter as a propellant. So in other words, we're talking about, oh, it's too far to go, but we have no idea of the possibilities of speed and time and space. We're looking at it from our very limited perspective and very limited education. Further, the other thing I was thinking about was the concept, the idea that no one's ever found any life anywhere and we don't intend to. Well, Enceladus, which is a moon of, I believe, Saturn, it's one of the 149 moons surrounding Saturn, and it is spewing. There's geysers on Enceladus, and it is spewing out salt water. And there is some effort underway. It's going to take to like 2033 to get a craft there to study it. But there's a very, very, very good possibility that Enceladus, although it is not being heated by the sun, it is being heated by the gravitational pull of Saturn internally. And between the tides going back and forth, they believe there's an ocean, a saltwater ocean, beneath the ice of Enceladus, probably Ganymedes and a couple of the other whose names evade me. So the thought of life, I don't expect little green men under the ice at Enceladus, but I do believe that it is probably rife with bacteria and maybe plant organism. You just don't know, because if you look at the Earth, the oceans in places we'd never expected to find life is teeming with things that do not need photosynthesis or a heat source from the sun. And that's what's been running through my mind. Thank you very much.
Yeah, this is a really interesting article. I'm just glancing through it. Scant on details, but the source for those that want to know is independent, not left wing or right wing, and largely factual, and has a lot of corroboration between the claims made. So highly recommend people read Sunny's source from the debrief if this topic interests you, which it probably does if you're here tonight. So thank you, Sunny, for sharing that. Very interesting.
Sure.
I'm not sure if Darren wanted to say anything. He was putting up an emoji, or it was just a reaction, I guess.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead if you did.
I guess it was just a reaction.
Okay. Dominic, you're next.
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed that contribution there, especially also because it shifts the idea, the common notion of aliens to be defined as being highly intelligent, human-like or beyond human-like or brain-like beings. It could be really just, first of all, I think it would be absolutely fantastic if we find a few microbes which did not originate from Earth, as in it wasn't a mistake and they were somehow attached to the material of a, I don't know, a rocket or something, and then kind of came actually from Earth, but really originated from somewhere else, or a different other process external to Earth. And I would put, if I would have to make a bet, also I'd rather think that the first thing we find is some kind of microorganism that and where we would be probably able to say that it did not originate from Earth. Is it tardigrades, these kind of microorganisms which can almost survive? You can shoot them into outer space and they could survive there a year or something, and you could bring them back to Earth and they would be in kind of stasis, but you could wake them back to life. I think it's tardigrades. So we know already of microbes which can survive absolutely crazy conditions, temperatures, radioactivity, and so on. And we know they exist. So we have them on Earth ourselves. So I wanted to point out, in terms of, it cut me off in terms of time, because feel free to cut me off, because this great conversation brought up so many ideas. So as someone who really wants to believe, to use the term, I follow a little bit someone called Mick West. He unfortunately gets a lot of hate from the, let's say, UFO community worldwide, but he's really good. He's really drilling in very seriously and very methodologically into debunking UFO news and so on. And in fact, as far as I know, he debunked into one of the last videos that you were showing, which is I think the Fleur video. I forgot the names. They were published, I think, actually in the 90s. And the thing is that they resurfaced decades later, but they're actually older than they actually are decades old. Long story short, he's like doing sort of simulation and computer simulations about camera angles, and he would publish all that. And he found out that they apparently had some kind of new system which would have some kind of balancing mechanism, making the the radar or whatever it was, technology it was, rotate in such a way that it looks like motion being but it wasn't actually the object moving. It was something to do with how the cameras were installed, how they were rotating, and so on. And the reason why, as someone who actually wants to believe that we have been visited, is that I'd really like to know. And I like that he's so critical, but also so good. So I encourage actually everyone who wants to believe to actually follow these debunkers, because if then someone like Mick West says, I don't know, then you're really onto something, right? If you take the biggest skeptic and they say that they don't know, that really gets me going. That's where I get excited,
Totally.
So that's my way of dealing with it.
I think David wants to jump in.
Yeah,
Cool.
Thank you, Ellis. Go ahead, David.
Oh, I just, as you're listening here, if we are the result of life that was in space and came down to Earth, wouldn't that make us aliens? Ourselves?
Again, if what?
If our life came from the space down to Earth, doesn't that, in a sense, make us aliens, alien life?
Yeah, and that we would have originated, from somewhere other than Earth. Yeah, I thought about that when I was younger. It's like maybe the Bible is a story of people that landed here, from space, and that's why people live to 130 years or 200 years old. There's that possibility, but think it's unlikely. We have a lot of explanation for, you know, Earth's origins and even the origins of bacterial life on Earth. We have a pretty good explanation of how life on Earth actually originated. So there aren't a lot of major missing pieces that make me think that that's a likely hypothesis, but it's still fun to think about.
Yeah,
So
and if
go ahead.
and if that microbe came down to us, that same microbe could come down on another planet.
Yeah, and you know, if there are microbes on asteroids that hit Earth and then, you know, seeds some sort of life on Earth, you know, that's a possibility, you know, as well as the current origins of life hypotheses. So let's let AG go next. Thanks, Dominic and David, for your comments.
Thank you. This was a very good presentation, and it kind of sprung a lot of thoughts that I had and I have been exploring. So I wanted to, you know, point out that there are a lot of ancient civilizations that have been there, especially in the East. If you check out China or India, and they have a lot of text which talks about humanity being billions and billions of years old, not few thousand years actually. And if you see, there have been a lot of similarities across the world. I was seeing a recent documentary talking about Latin America, where they had Mayan civilizations and even older, which are being said to be like at least 10,000 to 20,000 year old. And some of the structures that they have, especially the temples, etc., they're in the shape of pyramids, which are basically common across a lot of Southeast Asia as well as Egypt and other places. So the question is, are we currently more advanced, or the civilization that already existed several thousand years ago were more advanced than us for them to be able to, one, understand astronomy the way we understand today with computers and all the scientific you know, advancements that we have today, for those past civilizations to even being able to record astronomical phenomena and understand these planets and asteroids and all the zodiac signs, etc. How are they able to do it? How are they able to build the pyramids? How are they able to navigate these vast, you know, oceans across? Like, there are, you know, stories around, like, people were going from India all the way to Australia, all the way to Southern America, Latin America, etc., even way before Christopher Columbus and all, like, at least the stories that we hear right now as a part of history. So my, you know, thinking is it, do we, so basically the way we understand human beings today, like, we all have DNA, and, you know, smaller microorganisms like viruses have RNA, and that's what the real code of life is it really true? What if some other planets or other universes, etc., they are in different dimensions, they're right along with us, and we just don't know about it because we can't, you know, understand or even experiences, because we live in a different dimension and they live in different, because there are philosophies, especially in the eastern sides, where they talk about 11 dimensions and things along those lines. And we could be here right now as we are speaking, and in the same time we can have multiple other dimensions that we have no clue about, because we can't realize, because that's a completely different realm. So I think we need to think with respect to philosophy, all the text that already exists out there. There's just too much of text that already exists, and then combine it with, like, philosophy, you know, ancient civilizations, both religious and cultural texts that already exist, and what we know as of today. So those were some of the points I wanted to raise. Thank you.
Really good points. And there was a PBS series about a decade ago called Ancient Aliens that sort of talks about early civilizations and how there could have been alien influences assisting them. And I will say, as someone who's been to the top of Machu Picchu and seen some ridiculously huge stones that were apparently brought from the bottom of that valley, I'm like, how did anyone move something this big at that time? You know, they don't even know how they would do it now, you know, let alone, you know, up those very steep cliffs. And, you know, people did it, you know, 1,000 years ago or whatever the exact time was, I forget, but it was a long time ago when they had, you know, far inferior technology. And so some of the stuff there aren't good explanations for. I've heard good explanations for the pyramids. I've heard good explanations for, you know, the land bridge, you know, to cross over from Eurasia to North America back before, you know, in earlier times. So there are explanations for some of these things, but there are also ones that there are no explanations for now. As Will said, maybe there will be explanations for them later, but you know, alien assistance is a possible explanation as well that I think should be considered. The other thing, I'm really glad you talked about higher dimensions. I'm going to do an event on higher dimensions. The first philosophy essay I ever wrote was on a theory on higher dimensions, which is an alternative to string theory. And so I want to present that to the group and get feedback on it. So that said, I want to let Will go, and then Mike will go after him.
Thanks, Garrett. Yeah, I was thinking about what Dominic said and what Sonny said, where with Sonny was talking about black energy. This is another example of human arrogance. We sort of jump up and down and say we know it all. Usually the male of the species says we know everything, just about know everything now. We don't even know what dark matter is, or dark energy, which constitutes, what is it, 80% of all matter. We got no idea what it is. So there's an example of human arrogance right there, and of how much is unknown. And so I think somebody, Mike or Dave, my big fan, was saying that, you know, nothing can travel faster than the speed of light. Well, the universe itself is traveling faster than the speed of light, because the Big Bang occurred 13.5 billion years ago, and the known universe is 70 billion light years wide. So the expansion of the known universe is traveling faster than the speed of light. So there's something that can already be demonstrated clearly to travel faster than the speed of light, expansion. So there is that. Now, what's to say that other civilizations could not have invented technology that, or discovered laws of physics, more would be the point, discovered laws of physics, which in effect can enable them to travel faster than the speed of light, or travel through time. Who knows what's possible? Like an ant cannot comprehend Shakespeare or quantum physics. What perhaps can we not comprehend as well? And just finally, with what Dominic said about the skeptic, that's really interesting, because that I always think that you've got to be so skeptical about this stuff, because some people believe anything. You know, they believe in the healing power of crystals and things like that, which is obviously just psychosomatic, but placebo effect, which is very effective anyway. But you've got to be so skeptical. So I'll just finish. I know I'm going close to my 2 minutes, probably over it, but I was watching a TV program here in Australia called the 7:30 Report, and it was a very conservative program, usually interviewing the Prime Minister and politicians and about politics. And at the end of it one day, they had to show a segment on a woman. It was the most widely documented case in Australia of alien abduction. And it was near where I live, near a forest I used to run through at night for a buzz. I used to run in the middle of the night through the forest in the pitch black, preferably in the middle of winter. And it was quite exhilarating. Next thing, they're saying that aliens had abducted a woman near there. So I rang the program to get the telephone number. They actually advertised the telephone number of the people to speak to as the Australian UFO Society. And the guy who I got through to was an astrobiologist, professor of astrobiology. And he said, which reminded me of what Dominic said, you need to be more skeptical than the skeptic. And he said, when you filter it through that finest prism of skepticism, you get that one little grain of sand that we just don't know, we cannot explain. And that's why it's interesting to be skeptical, I think. And I'll shut up because I'm starting to annoy myself now.
We always like to hear from you, Will, but I don't know if a study on crystal effectiveness has been done. I'm going to actually look that up on ChatGPT to see whether or not it's been studied. Until it's been studied, I'm not going to dismiss it as crazy, because you never know. There's a lot of stuff, like you said, Will, that we thought were crazy at one time and turned out to have a an actual value, and like things that we thought were, there have been studies that show that plants actually scream before they're cut, and that they perspire before they're cut. And so plants may have some very, very limited form of sentience. So there's all kinds of very unusual things that are not fully understood yet, and crystals might be one of them. So, but great comments, and I want to let Mike go next.
Well, crystals might be one of them. Plato's Cave has an interesting thing to say about this, that the reality is not what we think it is. And so we, along those lines, when you say traveling to a planet 65 billion light years away at the speed of light is not possible. There's lots of things that occur faster than the speed of light. There's lots of things that appear to violate quantum physics and Einstein's theories. One of them is quantum tunneling, that things go through a barrier instantaneously that's too high to cross, and that's one of the shut up and calculate measurements says that's how the radio that's tuned into in your cell phone that listens to 3 towers simultaneously, and radio stations and Bluetooth simultaneously operates with that kind of story. There are 5 stages of civilization that are talked about in by some of the people who know, a guy named the Kardashev scale. And of the 5 that I described as to what kind of technology they have, our best physicists, our best scientists are only about 20% through stage 1. If we wanted to reach one of those other planets and warp space so that that planet might be sitting in a vase, sitting on your desk, and you can reach out and touch it, communicate with it, is not beyond the realm of possibility. We also assume that life that we know of is carbon-based and uses hemoglobin and insulin and serotonin, and that intelligence is based on the cerebral cortex. There appear to be intelligent phenomena that occur in heated gas plasma that are shadows of brilliance that defy belief. So there may be some form of intelligent life that may have its lifetime measured in nanoseconds and do strange things. I know I've probably used all my time, but I'll add 2 more things and then I'll go away. Star Trek, which we think is fiction, one of the advisors, the best advisors in physics, have been involved in creating the different versions of Star Trek. One in particular is Leonard Mlodinow, who was one of Hawking's disciples and ghostwrote a couple of books because he writes very slow because of his disability. Is mentioned in the footprint as one of his co-authors, and that implies when some of Hawking's pronouncements ought to be listened to. So it's possible. Everything is possible. In my failed military career, I saw lots of things on radar that have given names and catalog things that we just say are artifacts. that imply a lot more than what we do, but we dismiss them since they appear not to be hostile. And it may have been that somebody at stage 2 or even 5 of civilization may have mastered some of those things and may have mastered the sociological and political issues so they don't destroy themselves. The Star Trek Federation implied that that was one of the reasons for the various voyages, that they were kind of the executive branch, the enforcement branch of keeping different civilizations out of each other's hair. So there's much more to be said about those things, and all of the things. There's an organization called MUFON that I don't know if I came in a little late.
Maybe you can raise your hand again and continue, but that's good information.
Okay, I have one more statement. I
Okay.
have not found the party thing to make brief comments at the end of thing. It may be
under
that-
reactions, Mike, at the bottom of the screen, there should be a thing with reactions, which is where you put your hand up. Instead of putting your hand up where it says raise hand, there's a little party hat symbol.
I tried putting it up and it wasn't noticed.
So
So
I'm
I'll
gonna
try
do
it
it
again.
Yeah, I'm gonna do it here, and you can see my little party hat. So if you do that, if you tried to do it and we didn't notice, you can just try to speak up. And
Okay.
apologies, like there's a lot going on with a lot of people.
All right,
So I might have missed it if you did it.
This is an interesting subject, and you're plowing new ground to bring something like that up in a thinker's forum.
Yeah, that's what we try to do, is we talk about things that other people may not want to talk about and or be interested in talking about, but are intellectually interesting, usually that have a practical side to them, but you know, there's not always a practical side. Like tonight's I don't think has a big practical side, but there is a small one, like I said. Dominic.
Hey, yeah. So there was a few points, very interesting, by the way. And also, I love every Star Trek reference because as a declared Star Trek fan. So thanks for that. Building the warp drive, you know. Anyway, I wanted to talk. I think it was Will maybe who brought it up, but about the speed of light and that being seemingly the barrier of speed. So I want to say, as I speak as an entire hobbyist, and I love to stand corrected, but as someone who loves to investigate, you know, from behind his desk at his laptop using Google, I was also curious about the speed of light thing and why the expansion of the universe should seem to exceed that. And apparently the answer is, again, speaking as a hobbyist, that when we speak about the expansion of the universe, we speak of the expansion of space itself. And it's very different to speak of this as opposed to an object that's moving through space. And the speed of light is actually the speed of light in a medium. So the speed of light can be different in different mediums, and when we speak of the expansion of the universe, it's space itself that we are talking about. So I see nodding heads. I seem to be on the right track, but if I stand corrected or someone has more to jump in. But these are these little riddles that I sometimes love to resolve myself, and this is what I've found out. But again, I'm just a hobbyist. So that I don't know. Another thing about alien communication that comes to mind is, and this is again my own thing, since we have now the ability to read gravitational waves, which is apparently the excitation of space itself in a wave-like manner. Yeah, I think this is a whole new way. Actually, this was really a huge breakthrough that we can now, you know, from different angles, read that, let's call it vibrations of space, and from that conclude what happened, you know, somewhere far away, billions of years ago, and so on. But I sometimes wonder, could this be a communication mechanism of some sorts? But I haven't finished that thought really, but I like to practice a little bit of science fiction sometimes in my own head. So I'm just sharing that. And another thing I wanted to bring up, the whole let's say UAP or UFO topic, how it's referred to traditionally, I find it so interesting also for other reasons, which is, for example, just problem solving skills. You know, if you look at, I think another speaker brought up the Drake equation, and I think you had it briefly there in your slides as well. It's like, if you have no means to really investigate that properly, like through observation, I know we have the videos and so on, but let's say even, would there be a way to answer this question by means of reasoning? And I find it so interesting because, yeah, I see you're shaking your head there. You would think no, all right? You would think no. And to me, the fascinating thing is that if you look at the Drake equation, it's a pretty reasonable way to think. If we take certain parameters, you know, how many planets could there be in the Goldilocks zone, the whole thing, like where the planet, how far is it from the sun and so on. If we take all these parameters and we assume the worst case, where would we arrive, you know? And I already love that. It's like, and the same is like this. I heard that in Google interviews, I tried to once get an interview, a job interview. I ended up with something else nicely, but apparently they ask you questions like, how many people are sleeping right now, right? And you go, how the hell would I know? I would have to go to each single household and measure it as quick as possible and so on. But what you can still do is you can actually get close to an answer by thinking, how many billion people are on the planet? Where is it day right now? Where is it night? You know, and you can take a few parameters and build your own Drake equation and make a reasonable estimate. And you're one step closer to answering a question of which you at first think this is not possible to answer, you know? And this is why I also find the UFO phenomenon so interesting, that all these kind of problem solving methods came up, like the Drake equation, or where the hell is everyone, you know, which is just a very interesting way of methods of problem solving in itself, I think, and a lot can be learned from that. So yeah, that's just another angle maybe to look at the topic.
Yeah, I agree, Dominic, and I think, you know, breaking problems down and making solid assumptions on each piece is a great way to tackle problems. That's what I was taught to do as a computer scientist. And I did get past the first round of Google interviews before I got an offer from PwC and Google. And they asked a similar question to that, like very, you know, how much money does Gmail make? I think they asked me, you know, pretty big, meaty question. And yeah, I guess like it's actually the conversation on dimensions is going to be an example where I did that for higher dimensions, is sort of breaking a problem down one step at a time and tackling it that way. So for anyone interested in that, we'll probably do that in a month or so to talk about higher dimensional spaces, which also has very little practical reality, although practical implication, but there's a little bit, which we'll talk about then. So thank you for your comments, Dominic. Always good to hear from you. And thanks for staying up late for us. I know it's pretty late there in Europe. So Jenny, how are you? Good to hear.
Good, how are you?
Good.
I just wanted to follow up to what comment you made earlier, and I didn't want to break in. And when you said something to the effect that the sentient beings of plants, trees, and I don't know if you've heard that another sentient quality that trees have is that when they know they're dying, they will send the nutrients from itself to an offspring that may be 20 feet away, even though there's another plant 3 or 5 feet closer, you know, nearer to the tree. You've heard of that?
I have not
right?
heard that. That's fascinating.
Yeah.
If you have an article about that, Jenny, send it to me. I would love to, have that in my records.
Okay, well, I listen to NPR, and the scientists who have studied extensively on plants and trees and all that was talking about that, as well as in a forest, there are only a certain number of trees in any forest that is designated as a forest. And because trees know that if you have more than this number, or if you have, then it's not sustainable. So they know how many trees are right for a particular forest. And that's another thing that is just amazing. How do they know that, you know?
Right.
So,
I hypothesized, years ago that 100 to 200 years from now, not only will it be crazy to eat meat, which I still do, and even though I don't want to, I tend to crave it, but I think that plants won't be eaten anymore if it does turn out to be that they're sentient, which what you're saying and what I said sort of make it seem like they are. And so I think all food will eventually be like lab grown, like just, I know that doesn't sound very appealing, but I think it'll actually taste even better than the real thing by that point. So
I know I've actually made that kind of comment in the past in some of these meetings. Okay, so, we kill animals to eat meat. If we kill plants, they're sentient beings, then what are we supposed to eat then?
Right. And that's where we grow it, right? Like we grow it
Right.
from the beginning, and we manufacture it basically from, there was a thing about, I forget what that article was. There was an interesting food tech article where they did this. They like basically grew food from, like thin air, essentially. It was a very interesting article. It was like mushrooms or something like that they grew from thin air. I don't remember it well enough. I wish I had saved that article. That's why I need to keep it in my logs. These articles of really interesting stuff. So but we'll see. I don't know. I love fake and bacon, and fake meats are pretty delicious sometimes. So that said, Dave, why don't you go next?
Yeah, and even if we're just eating mushrooms, we're still eating life forms.
Yeah.
At least with fruit, it's designed by nature to be eaten. Fruit is actually there to be eaten to disperse the seeds. So you can become a fruitarian, which I tried when I was living in a hot place, but it's pretty difficult up here in Toronto where it's cold in the winter. But actually, my main point, getting off topic here with the diets, my main point is the Drake equation. I don't know if this is the reason you didn't want to use it, but the variability of each assumption is so huge.
That is why I didn't want to use it.
Yeah,
You know me so well.
Well, it's just logical, right?
Yeah.
It's just, it almost tell, when you add the variability of each assumption together, and you're multiplying it out together to get the final answer, it's almost meaningless.
Yeah, and that's exactly my feeling of the Drake equation. I almost wanted to include it just to explain that to people. But like, you get it, David. Like the problem with the Drake equation is it's got like 7 assumptions, each one of which has drastically huge boundaries of error. And you're basically just taking a huge swag and then you multiply them by each other. So you multiply all the error. And now you have a swag of 7 swags, which is an even bigger swag, which, by the way, for those who don't know, swag is stupid, wild ass guess. So I shouldn't swear on this, but so in case we have kids watching someday. So but yeah, it's like it's to me it's meaningless, and that's why I just went with like the number of planets, and then just look at the sheer number of planets, and then come on, like with a number 2 with 21 zeros after it, like we can't be the only life. How could we be? Whereas when I was a kid, we all thought it was crazy that there were aliens, right? And no one thought about it that way. But I wrote my essay on why I believe that there are higher powers out there, which is, higher forms of life, a bunch of years ago. And so, but I don't know if that argument had been made before that or not. I hadn't heard it yet. But Dominic, you had a party hat on. Do you want to say something?
Yeah, thank you. I first time hear this criticism of the Drake equation, so I find this very exciting. Wouldn't it still make sense to have just a minimum value? Every formula you can usually do, I think, in at least linear ones, where you can get a minimum value. There must be some value of some benefit from that, especially when numbers are so high. Even you end so the bare minimum, there must be one, so there should be some benefit from that, no?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Dominic. It's a good idea to, okay, let's take the worst case scenario is basically what you're talking about. And in that case, you pretty well end up close to 0, I think, from the Drake. So what does that tell you? I mean, I tend to think, not very valuable. I think, like Garrett, what you were saying is you just look at the huge number of Goldilocks planets out there. And to think that there's nobody else just doesn't make sense, but we can't quantify it because we just don't know. Hello?
I think Janet wants to jump in as well.
Okay.
I had a question, actually. Ginny had mentioned about plants feeling the pain when you cut them. How is that when you have to prune a plant, though? Is that the same thing or no?
So I mentioned that actually. Ginny mentioned some other things that I didn't know about. And I think she had to drop off, unfortunately. But yeah, I mean, it's true when you prune as well, but you know, we can't, like, I don't know, there's just a sort of practical limitation to worrying about this stuff. The way that I look at it is, you know, we had a conversation about reincarnation, and there's actually, it turns out that there's a lot of scientific evidence for reincarnation. I think that, you know, if plants are sentient, you can be reincarnated as a plant, but you had to do something pretty darn bad to get reincarnated as a plant, because they have very little power in the world. They have very little flexibility and ability to influence much of anything. And so, you know, to some degree, you can't feel bad for pruning your, not too bad for pruning your plant. Say a little blessing in your mind, but you know, don't sweat it too much, is my opinion. And you're not killing the plant by pruning it anyway. You're just hurting it a little bit, but not in a really biological way per se. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because what you're doing is you're giving it new growth.
Yeah, that's a good point, because when you prune it, you are actually helping the plant in some ways, as well as causing it a little bit of temporary harm. And so you're right, there's a mixed blessing there with pruning. I'm forgetting my gardening. I just moved into a house this year, so it's been a while since I pruned.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank
I
you.
think Will wanted to jump in.
Oh, thanks. So just with the plant thing, I mean, I think we're going down Looney Tunes road big time. We're all going to end up in the asylum if we start thinking that we can't eat plants, or plants are going to be feeling pain. Yes, they do demonstrate a miraculous ability to communicate via their root systems. For instance, when there's a parasitical infection in a tree, it communicates with other members of the same species, and they display certain defenses to protect them from the parasite. But to think that they experience pain or discomfort like we do, it's just not even worth thinking about. Because what are we going to stop cows from eating grass? Because cows can't eat grass because they're hurting the grass. You know, like if you go down that road, you just go right round the bend. But yeah. I've given up eating pork because I saw how they slaughter pigs. I won't even say it, it's so obscene, but pigs are very intelligent. They realize what's going on. So they have to combat that with a certain technique they use on the pigs. And if you saw it, you would never eat bacon again. Well, most people probably do, because we just don't really care, do we? Most people, we just eat anything, shove it down our stomach. Anyway, maybe we could have a topic on the ethics of eating other things, and how everything in the natural world is eating something else.
I think that would be an interesting conversation. That's a good idea. By the way, Carolyn, I don't know if you wanted to talk about, I don't know if you were there for Carrie's experience, or if he's going to be able to make it or not. I don't know if you wanted to talk.
We were there as a family.
So do you want to kind of set the stage for where, you know, your story? Carolyn is kind of a guest speaker, and her son as well, we're hoping will come, but maybe Carolyn, if you can share your experience for the audience.
Yeah, this was in approximately 1971, was documented in the newspaper and on television at the time, or what we knew as television at the time. There was a UFO, that we called it that flew from Kentucky to Minnesota, or it was Montana, I think it was Minnesota. And it was photographed and it was in the newspaper. But my son, my husband, and I were out in the street in front of our house, playing baseball. We were working with him so he'd be a little better at Little League. And all of a sudden we looked up because I caught the ball he hit, and there was this literally flying saucer hovering over us. It was electric blue. It was probably as large as a football field. It was huge. And it wasn't that far off the ground. It was, gosh, maybe 500 or 600 feet off the ground. About the size of a fairly tall building. And the bottom, it was circular, like we would typically think of a flying saucer. It was a bit convex on the bottom, but had a heavy convex top to it that covered about almost 2/3 of the top of the structure. And it stayed there long enough that I ran in the house, ran to Air Force Base to see if they knew what was flying over us. And they said they had no record of any object in the immediate area. Went back outside. It was still there, hovering. And we continued to play ball and just ignored it. But it stayed there probably a good 5 to 10 minutes. And then it took off like a shot. It just flew. You could blink your eyes and it was gone. But it was this electric blue. It had some windows kind of around that upper bowl, and or what appeared to be windows. I have no idea if it was if there was anything inside it that, you know, it could be robotic. It could have had some kind of known entity driving it in some way, but I have no idea about that. All I know is it was a flying saucer. Most unusual. We've never forgotten it. My son could still remember it. My husband is deceased now, so he can't relate it anymore, but yeah.
Sorry for your loss. That sounds like something that I would never forget. Like, I don't think that's forgettable. Unless there's Men in Black around, but
didn't see any living anything driving it, so to speak, but the object we did see, and it hovered long enough that we could really identify what it was. And it was not like way up there or way out there. It was over us. Wow. Kind of like it was watching, like, you know, you would go somewhere and you would see something happening that was unusual to you, and you'd stay there and watch and see what they were doing. And that's kind of the way I thought, oh, well, they're watching what we're doing out here in the street, and they're curious. Interesting.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Sunny had a party hat on right before David, so I'm going to let her go next to comment on that.
Sunny, Dominic, and then David.
Oh, thanks. I missed Dominic.
Oh, hi, Carolyn. Thank you very much for sharing that story with us. I'm interested in, did you hear noise? Was there like a motor or anything that you could detect?
No, there was no noise. It was totally silent. Totally
that is
silent.
Unusual.
Even when it, you know, left where it was hovering, there was no sound whatsoever. And I can't believe how quickly it was gone and out of sight, just in seconds. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I think Dominic next.
Yeah, go ahead, Dominic.
Thank you. Brief, Justin. First of all, I really thank you for your report, and I really appreciate it. If also you allow, the question is, there was a moment where you seemed to be feeling very much at peace with, and so you didn't feel a threat, because at some point you were saying that you felt confident enough in the situation to ignore it for a moment and to keep playing the ball game there. Would it be okay for you? I don't mean to put you on the spot. I'm just so curious. What put you at ease with the situation and make you feel so safe, considering that it was so unusual? Was it if you want to share, I'd be just very curious.
I think the reason is that I've traveled so much and worked in foreign countries where I too was curious about people and wondering, their lifestyle and their language and so on. And I knew about flying objects because I'd read about them. I just never dreamed I would ever see one. But yeah, I think my comfort zone was that same feeling I would have in a foreign country.
Thank you.
Once you've traveled, all life forms are blasé.
Yeah.
But
World is a mysterious place.
I actually had two comments. I mean, the one comment is like Dominic. I was quite surprised to hear that after a very short period of time, you went back to your baseball. You got this huge spaceship hovering over you, and you thought, oh well, okay, Johnny, can't hit this ball, kind of thing. But the other question I had is, surely there would be other people who corroborate on your observation. I mean, there should have been, if this thing hung around 600 feet above the ground, it was so huge, there must have been like 1,000 people that would have seen it. It's just, like in Russia, they had that meteorite, and how many people took movies of it even.
Well, as I mentioned, it was documented. It had been seen by a number of people between Kentucky and I want to say Montana. It could have been Minnesota, but Minnesota.
Did anyone, I guess you didn't have a camera handy to say,
No, but they had pictures of it in the newspaper in Champaign, Illinois, which is where we were located, the following day.
Really?
Someone had taken a photograph, and it was a photograph that was clear enough and not that far away that it
should have been dead clear. It should have been like taking a picture of your car.
I tried to, I mean, I didn't cut the picture out of the newspaper, but I tried to locate it on Google. We didn't have internet at that time, or, we didn't have, I don't think, they must have some record of it.
Well, yeah, I would think they'd have
in the
lots of
Gazette,
really good...
and it was, since it was cited and documented all the way, over a huge part of our country.
And yet, I think a lot of people would be skeptical, even though for you, I'm sure, you're not skeptical, but I think a lot of other people would be about what actually happened. But there you go. I mean, it's just like, I remember reading about the miracle of Palma in Portugal. Is that the name of it? I don't know if anyone else has heard of that. The sun moved around in the sky, and literally hundreds of people saw it, but then there was also people who said, I was there and nothing happened. So it's an interesting phenomenon. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, it was interesting.
I was trying to look back to see if I could find that, but I can't. I can't find it.
Carrie might remember whether he, his exact age, but I know he was in Little League at the time, so he must have been probably 8 or 9, possibly 10. And I know that my youngest one was taking a nap at the time, so he must have been around 2 or 3. So that's why I pegged it at 71.
Did you feel somewhat shortchanged? There was no probing, as is typical of aliens. They take you to the ship and, do some sort of probing.
I don't even know if it was manned, shall we say, with quotation marks. It could have been operating robotically. Who knows?
Hi, this is Janet. I do know that when I went to the Pine Bush Museum, they actually had photos and proof of seeing a UFO. And in Pine Bush, they did say that in 72, there was a sighting. Their explanation as to why the UFO goes to certain areas and not others is the magnetism in the land. And Pine Bush, that area, it's heavier in magnet, the rocks are, than other areas. That's what they said to us. I don't know.
We live
But there's
between a
lots of
cornfield and a
stories.
bean field. So,
Yeah, I think trying to understand the mind of things that are so capable that they can fly without sound, something as big as a football field and as tall as a building, might be like, look, I consider myself pretty good at like trying to empathize with complicated subjects, but that's way beyond what I think I can, do very effectively. As far as like, what attracts them to different parts of the world. But go ahead, David.
You know what an interesting question might be for this group is, if an alien spaceship came and wanted you to come away for 1 year and then return you, no harm done, would you want to go? Sort of a peripheral to the central idea of the discussion, but kind of an interesting question.
Yeah.
I'd be curious. In fact, I want to do another poll because we're kind of rounding out to 20 minutes left, because we've had a fair amount of time to talk, is whether or not the answer is different now, between do you believe aliens exist and do you think aliens visited Earth? Let's see if it's any different. I don't know if I'm going to be able to go back to the old results, but I'm curious whether or not anyone changed their minds. And thank you so much, Carolyn, for sharing your story.
I just wish Kerry was here to give you his impression as a child.
Yeah, I'm sure that would have been a pretty mind-blowing thing for anyone to see of any age, quite frankly.
Are we able to comment, or?
I don't think polls allow for comments, but if you wanted to, yeah, you can.
No, I just had my hand raised. I was.
Oh yeah, we're gonna go through, and actually you haven't spoken yet, Christina, have you?
No, not yet.
So why don't you go next, and then we'll go to Mike and Dominic, who have already spoken.
I know, I think Dominic was first.
Yeah, he was
No, I was
before you,
just
but
gonna
because
say,
you haven't spoken, I'm gonna jump you a little ahead of the line.
I was just gonna say, okay, so when you said you called the base or what have you, has anyone thought about the fact that this could be something here on Earth that was made, but it's top secret, and so that they're not able to tell you about it?
I just don't. My father was a pilot. My husband was a World War II airplane buff. He knew everything that flew in the sky. And, my feeling is that it was so unique to anything that was on this planet in the 70s that I just don't believe it could have been from here.
I mean, if
we
that
still
were,
don't have anything like it.
Yeah, if that were a government project, like we would have seen it by now in the public, right? Like, now we're 50 years later, like I don't think the government can keep a secret for 50 years because like everything has to be publicly displayed, after I forget how long with Freedom of Information Acts at this point. So you can't keep stuff that big, that secret for that long. It would have been commercialized by now.
Well, the closest thing we have is the Batwing, and we have that helicopter, I forget the name of it, that goes straight up and down,
Yeah. But that makes a noise, right? And something as big
big
as a
noise.
football field and, and as tall as a building that makes no noise,
Mm-mm.
never and 50 years ago, like not likely that was human invented.
Not
So,
likely from our planet. No,
anyone else have other questions for Carolyn before we go back to hands? Just raise your party hat if you do. But I'll just thank you again, Carolyn. And if you have questions or comments that you want to share, in addition to your story, feel free to raise your hand as well.
Okay.
Thanks so much. Mike, go ahead next.
Some of what I said affects what Carolyn had too. So, but I did. Let me see if I can tie it together in a neat package, real briefly. When we say that Einstein's timing and concept of reality, he's talking about group philosophy, group velocity, how you take a particle from one point to another. There are several other velocities that can be measured and are actually used in devices that you can make and buy right now. One of them is phase velocity. Now, if you have a hologram or a laser pointer and you move it across the ceiling, it can move faster than the speed of light. It doesn't make noise when it moves. It can send signals back to its source and information back to its source. Einstein described that. He described something called quantum entanglement, which he described as spooky action at a distance, which also could be relevant to this. It also might mean that something like that that uses different dimensions than the four that we know in space and time could create things that even violate causality, that the resultant action could occur before the cause. There's another one that is pretty well documented of the similar to what Carolyn talked about, called the Phoenix Lights, which were a similar, very large thing, bigger than a skyscraper that was moving across the sky and at high rates of speed, and then disappeared. And it was hovered over Phoenix for several hours, and they didn't have a useful explanation, but there was a lot of documentation of what occurred, and the thought of it being an interdimensional construct had been raised in that case. And that has a lot of information in the New York Times and in Wikipedia. So I will limit to one subject, but I wanted to say something about I have after we cover that, maybe there's another subject I could bring up on this thing.
Yeah, raise your hand again, Mike. I thought you already covered 2 or 3 there, and the one that I remembered hearing was the idea that if you flash a light across the room, that it can travel faster than the speed of light. The light is not actually traveling faster than the speed of light. A shadow can travel faster than the speed of light, but that's not actually anything physical traveling faster than the speed of light. The photons are still only traveling at the speed of light, but the rate at which photons appear and disappear at a surface can happen, can occur faster than the speed of light, but the actual physical things traveling are still limited to the speed of light. Now, that doesn't to me mean that the speed of light is a fundamental limitation that always needs to hold true for all of physics. I think we could someday discover physics that allows faster than light travel. I was trying to explore, things like that when I was in college and taking physics. So
yeah,
it's hypothetically possible, but I just wanted to explain the
Right, but that's the group velocity versus phase velocity.
great. So Dominic, go ahead.
Yeah, I actually I love Mike. I love the way you think, because it's very take these interesting, you know, fringe science insights and put them to a test, you know, especially the one about the laser pointer. Why is the dot that I point, the dot projected onto the moon with a laser pointer, when I move it from the left to the right, and my hand is just going a few centimeters left and right, why, due to the angle, the dot that is pointing at the moon seems then to, you know, covers a much bigger distance. Why is that? What does that mean? But yeah, it's true. After a bit of reading, and also like Garrett said, there's nothing actually, no information exchange happening that is greater than the speed of light. But that actually intrigued me a lot as well. So I really like that you brought that up, because it's a good question. Anyway, I actually wanted to also say that since we do a bit of, I was hoping tonight to hear a few kind of reports, maybe like we did, like Caroline very kindly shared. I would try to very briefly say that I haven't had a sighting myself, but I had the opportunity to talk to someone who is a member of a family of a friend of mine, who had a sighting which was very clear, and the person described it to me in more detail, which I won't do right now, but it was really very clear. It was some hovering object above her head in different light schemes and so on. And that person had no reason to lie to me when she reported that to me, because I was attending a wedding and we all knew each other. So yeah, so I was just amazed to have another first-hand report. I can't share details now. I would just say that the woman who shared the report with me had very deep grievance due to certain family incidents, which were very serious as well. So I don't know. Maybe why the reason I'm mentioning this is that I think in her case, she was kind of in a weird way lucky to have that observation, because it gave her so much hope and something going beyond, while having this other thing going on in her family at the same time. So yeah, we talked like for 5 hours. So I just was sharing that. But there, I didn't have the sighting myself, but a first-hand report there as well, and it was very authentic. And it's just so different to hear this face to face, like we heard today from you, Caroline, or like the person I met, because you know they're not telling you just a story. That's actually at least 100% true to them. That's what you can say, you know. And this is just amazing to hear that. So yeah, I think that's it. That's just what came out of my mouth now.
Thank you, Dominic. Dave wanted to comment on that.
Yeah, just the two things. Like Dominic just said, I think that people who see it really see it. You know, it's not like they're trying to deceive you. What they think they saw is what they, you know, what they think they saw is what they think they saw. But the interesting thing that Dominic also said is his friend, this woman that was talking to him for 5 hours, also was going through some psychologically stressful times with other family members or something like that. And I think, personally, I think a lot of reports are more psychological episodes than, you know, objective empirical evidence for alien spaceships. That would be my take on it. Thanks.
Well, Carolyn's story didn't have any of that I heard, unless there was something you didn't share, Carolyn. You know, I didn't hear anything.
Well, the odd thing I thought was just how, you know, within a very few minutes or a minute or two, it became very accepting that there was this huge alien object floating over them, and they continued playing baseball. So that made me just wonder, you know.
But do you know how you would act if you were in that situation? Like,
Yeah,
it's one of those things.
I
mean,
I'd
you know
run
how you
around-
think. You know how you think you would act, but do you really know how you would truly act? I don't know if any of us feel like that's one of those things that like nothing in life prepares you for what Carolyn described. And I don't know that
True.
I don't know that any of us know exactly how we would respond to that. You know, I mean, I'm sure right now I'd be pulling out my iPhone, right? But like,
Yeah.
other
Yeah.
than that, I mean,
I would be gobsmacked. I mean, I would be just standing there staring like in a psychotic state, I think is how I would be. I wouldn't be, oh, well, okay, Johnny, it's your turn to hit the baseball. So
Well, we were awestruck at the beginning,
yeah, I know, but
you know, and called the that's why I called the Air Force Base, because I thought, this is weird.
Yeah.
You're
But
talking about a
they-
significant amount of time passing. I mean, you can,
Yeah.
you know, so, you know, like, yeah, but there were two party hats, and I think one was Dominic first and then Will, if I remember right.
Yeah, no, yeah, I wanted to add to my story. Okay, the whole story is that I talked to the brother whose wedding it was of that woman, actually 3 or 4 years earlier on. And this was witnessed by this woman and the brother. And I actually have a whole interview with the brother, which I never edited. I interviewed him for 90 minutes about the same incident. And then I asked him back then if I could also interview his sister, right? But he didn't reply at the time. And even though he's a friend of mine, we didn't continue on that. I felt I've exhausted his time a bit with the whole UFO thing. I was like, and then he never, and it was just coincidence. Then years later, I was invited to the wedding. And because I don't have contact to the rest of his family, only met his sister at the wedding. And it was only when we sat at the table that it all linked together that this person is this is the sister. And so we have two witnesses actually. So, and maybe I should edit the material and publish it sometime. Maybe Garrett, if you want, I would do it only for your project.
Let's talk. Let's talk. Reach out to me offline in the online community. That'd be great.
Cool.
Will, did you want to say something, and then Dave?
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I mean, so it's good to be skeptical. Of course, absolutely be skeptical, but every now and then there's things that are very hard to explain, like what Caroline said, I think, and the way when she said that it just took off, you know, at this sort of inexplicable speed. Like, you've got to wonder sometimes. And I went to sea most of my life, and there's some weird things you see right out in the middle, you know, hundreds and hundreds of miles from land, in the middle of the night. But the most compelling story I heard was a guy that I went to sea with. He'd been at sea all his life, 40 years, and they were celebrating his 40th year at sea. He was the bosun of the ship, and they were having this little party, and nobody was talking to him because none of the crew liked him. He was so squeaky clean. He was a real honest dude. He was sort of like too perfect. A lot of the crew didn't like him, and he had medals from the Queen of England for work to charity that he'd done, which was riding around Tasmania, the island of Tasmania, which is 400 miles south of Australia. And he would ride like the 1,000 miles or whatever around Tasmania for charity for children with various diseases. And he got medals from the Queen, and he used to rake them out and show people. But he won Australian of the Year or something, Tasmanian of the Year for the state. Anyway, I said to him, I felt sorry for him. I said, Graham, so I went over to him because nobody was talking to him at his own party. So I went over to him and I said, Graham, what was the most interesting thing that happened to you in 40 years on the ocean? And he said that the night that Ivan Milantz, I think his name was, went missing. This was a UFO case where the guy said he'd been followed by a plane, by a light. He was in a light aircraft, and he vanished without a trace over the Bass Strait, which is the stretch of water that we used to sail across every night. This was quite a mystery why this guy went missing, but one theory was that he was actually flying upside down, and the light that he reported was the moon reflecting off the ocean, which is a phenomenon that can happen to pilots apparently. Sometimes in the dark they actually go upside down, they don't know, and they think the moon is above them, where it's actually the reflection on the water. So that was one theory, but they never found any trace of his plane. So I said to Graham, what was the most interesting thing that you saw in 40 years at sea? And he said that night that guy went missing, he was on watch on the bridge of the ship. And this is a guy who was such a reputable character that no one would even talk to him because he was just annoying. He was so honest and nice. And he said he was on the bridge of the ship on watch because they have an officer on watch for 4 hours and a crewman and he was the bosun on watch for 4 hours. And the officer looks at the radar and the crewman looks visually for lights of fishing boats or yachts. And he said that night that guy went missing, the whole of the bridge lit up and they walked out onto the wing of the bridge, which is like an area outside the contained part of the bridge where the captain can navigate against the wharf and he can see straight down. He said, we walked outside onto the wing of the bridge and this light was just lit up everything and it was silent, just silence. And he said, I looked at the first mate who was on watch and he looked at me and he said it wasn't a helicopter because it was silent. And he said, then bang, it just vanished. And that was the night the guy went missing and said, who reported to the tower, it was all documented that are being followed by lights. So things like that do make you wonder, you know, but you got to be so skeptical again, like he could have been flying upside down looking at the moon, for instance. That's a great theory and you should put all cards on the table, I think. But every now and then you just wonder.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
There's sorry, Carolyn, go ahead if you wanted to say something.
Well, it just, that doesn't explain the light in the sky and the whole bridge being lit up, does it?
Yeah, and he was such a reputable character too. Like he's just so honest. He didn't drink or anything. And you wouldn't get a more reputable witness than this.
I mean, it's hard to correlate the two things happening, but he's got two unusual phenomena going on at the same time.
Yeah, you got to wonder.
So Dominic, I'm going to let you say one more thing and then I'm going to close out because I've been up since really, really early, more early than usual.
Oh yeah. Oh my God. Yeah, it's 3 a.m. here as well. I just wanted to say actually, and because we talked about laser pointers earlier, I know we talked about them in a very different context, but it brought one thing to mind. I had a conversation in another group, actually, I think a year ago, where a gentleman was reporting about a sighting, and he took a laser pointer and pointed at it in the sky, which you should never, never, never do. It's against the law to do that. And I told the gentleman that as well at the time. I know we talked about laser pointers for something different, but just putting it out there that you really shouldn't do that. You could cause a plane crash or something. So, so just putting it out there. Okay, that's it.
Thanks. I do want to thank everybody for coming tonight. I will encourage people to come back next week. We're going to talk about the pros and cons of artificial intelligence, which be a much more practical, like impacts your day-to-day life kind of thing. And I will most likely do demos of some of the artificial intelligence tools. And they are pretty mind-boggling if you haven't used them. I will probably do text, video, and audio, all three demos, because I've been playing and dabbling in all three. And so, yeah, so I guess hope people can come for that. The week after that will probably be something on critical thinking. We haven't posted it yet, but I'm probably going to do a couple on critical thinking, and then I'll do the novel hypothesis on higher dimensions that we talked about tonight. So if anyone has other topics they want to hear about, please join us in the online community and suggest those, where you can reach me at garrett@freethinkerinstitute.org. And you know, feedback is always welcome. So thanks a lot everybody for coming. Thanks especially to Carolyn for sharing her story tonight. And I hope you all have a great rest of your evening or morning, day, as the case may be, depending on where in the world you are. So thanks a lot, everybody. Take care and hope to see you again next week.
Thanks.
Garrett, how can we get the taping?
Reach out to me, send me an email and ask me for the recording and I'll share it with you.
Terrific, thank you.
Yep, no problem. All right, thanks a lot, everyone. Bye-bye.